Hello and welcome to this pattern cutting, design, fabric and construction analysis of the recent Chanel Haute Couture Spring Summer 2026 collection. So you're going to look at what fabrics did they use, how did they put it together, how did they actually pattern cut the styles. I'm going to first of all do like a little bit of an overview of what I thought was really interesting from a pattern cutting perspective, things you might want to use in your own projects, and also stuff I didn't think worked as well as I could have, and I will explain why again. Some of them are visually, some of them are proportionally, and you might not agree with me, or you might, but it's just the sort of things you might want to look at when you're creating your own designs. And that doesn't mean copying Chanel, that means looking at Haute Couture, the sort of pinnacle of fashion design, and thinking, oh, I like the proportions, I like the layers, I like how I pattern cut that, and I will sort of interpret it for myself, my own proportions, my own body. The whole theme was quite whimsical. When I first saw the catwalk with the mushrooms, I have to say, I was thinking, oh, I hope this is not going to be like too what Marc Jacobs did with all the putting all the Japanese cartoons on the bags. I know there are art around cartoons, but I was sort of expecting it to be sort of quite trying to be relevant, but this was actually really beautiful. There was lots of 1920s elements, lots of sort of feathers, mushrooms. This was one of the styles I thought worked really well because everything is see-through. It's very much about layers, which when you pattern cut, of course, means you can look at all the details and stuff like that, and the seams become part of a design. But it also means you see what's underneath, and with some it worked better than others. This was a really good one. I really liked this interpretation of the classic Chanel suit, even the classic shoes, the classic bag. But again, it was made out of a see-through fabric. And I think then instead of our usual wool, it had, I think, feathers embroidered. So really nice. There was lots of volume contrasted with fitted styles, like a bit like a mushroom, I was thinking as I was looking at it. But some have worked really well. This is an example where you have like a classic top and a classic skirt, and then the volume is quite subtle. And I will look at this style later. But you can see it's quite a gentle, proportionally increase with all the sort of fluffy feather volume at the bottom. So that worked really well. I also really liked it here on the skirt, where again it was like a straight sort of style. Again, it's a whole sort of 1920s where it's a straighter style, and then the sort of like what you would call a mushroom, the gills maybe, not gills, gills. That sort of feathered volume at the hem of the top works really well, and it isn't abrupt, because some of the other styles I was not a fan of, and it's stuff like that where you have some of the volume on the jacket. It's quite a very boxy fit, and then you have the fitted skirt, and then again sort of volume coming out, but it doesn't quite all work together. And another example was this one again, where you just have that sort of random explosion of volume at the hem, which doesn't really sort of, it looks like you got a skirt and then the sort of see-through tube of your skirt, and then the fluff. So again, the proportions don't quite work together. It's sort of quite abrupt. It cuts the body, maybe that's the best way to say it. It cuts the body in a strange way. And again, this was similar. And interestingly, Schiaparelli also did a style like that, and there it worked much better. But here again, it sort of feels a bit like fitted, very nice jacket, and this sort of see-through A-line skirt, and then suddenly all the feathery volume. So probably beautiful construction, beautiful materials, but I don't think it quite works. Again, it sort of chops you up horizontally. It's not gentle. It doesn't really work anatomically with your body. Then staying, because they all reminded me a little bit of sort of mushrooms, a bit too obviously. And there were two examples which I just thought, yes, I can see. You looked again at the gills of the mushrooms, of the underneath of the mushroom. That's exactly it. It doesn't quite work. And I think that band across here, that's quite hard to pull off in a balanced fashion. Here it just looks like the ruching on a curtain, really, doesn't it? Or something like that. It looks too heavy, it looks too obvious, and then the gills, they do look a little bit maybe too anatomically in the wrong way, if you guess my meaning in that. I just think it didn't quite work. And there was a different sort of mushroom one, again, with a sort of elasticated one. Again, I can see it's quite beautiful, there's a line, the pattern cutting is quite clever, and I do like the feathery skirt, but that's actually better than the pink one. But again, quite a heavy line again across your shoulder. Another theme was lots of layers, as I said in the beginning, and there's some which are really beautiful, like this works really nice, and it's just all these layers of red. What I found a little bit at times didn't really work as well is the underwear it shows. So here she's wearing, I think, maybe bright yellow or bright white underwear, and it just really shows through. It's not gentle details, it just looks like she's wearing her gym kit underneath, basically. So I think that's sort of, again, in the lines of the outer garments are really beautiful, with a sort of pleated skirt, and then like, it might be a dress actually, and then the dress on top, but then the underwear cuts it at different points. So I thought that didn't work that well, and they did the same across all the different skin tones, where they chose underwear styles and underwear shapes which sort of jarred you out. Again, here I quite like this little sort of sailor top nearly, you know, it's sort of like on like a 1920s, actually it's 1920s sportswear. It's, you know, what Chanel would have, you know, when she looked at men's knitwear, and that's how sort of she started a lot of her style. You can see that there, it's like a little, it could be a knitted top or woven top, so slightly sailor inspired 1920s sportswear. But again, the sort of underwear, something, it like breaks it too much rather than it being gentle. And again, here, that's a really beautiful layered style. And the underwear, I actually get why they made it yellow, because there is a yellow detail on the embroidery, so you sort of, but then the skirt underneath is bright white, and then you got that red line. So there's something, again, there, if you're looking at see-through things about how it layers on. So it might be even depending on your skin color, the different, if you do a white fabric on top and you line it, you might not want to line it in white, you might want to line it in a pink or in a skin color, because it all sort of interacts together. And the better, this was actually my favorite one, where you saw the underwear underneath, because this felt like it was more purposeful, like it was the lace on the underwear, the embroidery, which sort of, you say, yeah, I understand why that's showing through. So it's sort of, it's quite interesting. I think a lot of them worked well, but some of them just thought it makes it look quite blocky, basically, when you're looking with see-through fabrics. But now completely differently, I quite liked some of the more outwear stuff. This style, it is complete haute couture. You probably wouldn't make a garment like that, but it really reminded me of Yves Saint Laurent 1967. That's because I've been looking at the Mondrian dress, and there's a video for that. I will put it in the description. But the closing look of that collection was actually a completely crocheted wedding dress, which looked very much like that. But I think there, the sort of contrast volume at the top, feathers, worked really well with the slinky silk skirt. So over the top, but out there. But some of the other stuff like this reminded me of graduate university textiles collections. So you can see, yes, lots of interesting techniques were used, but it doesn't actually look like maybe a flattering garment. But they're there. So speaking of really wearable clothes, there were some beautiful black dresses. I really like this one, which is like the most classic black dress. But the jewellery sort of comes in and out, so it works really well. And it's got some really nice lines. I would have liked to look at that. The reason I'm not doing it is because with black you can't see the details. very easily. So it would be quite interesting to look how the lines are on this. I might quickly draw it out in a second. But let's switch over to a table and have a look at some more details. There we are. Okay. So this dress is like that. It's of course very hard to work out. What is perfect on this one is the neckline. There it's sitting on her shoulder, works really well. It sits exactly at the sort of right place. And it's quite interesting because it isn't too high. So a normal sort of boat neck becomes nearly like that. Hers is more like this, or maybe even a little bit lower. And what you might find when you're doing a neckline like this is that you really have to contour it. So you might find you have to use some of your bust dart shaping, and you just pinch out a little bit out of your neckline, and then you pivot it into your dart, and your dart becomes bigger. It all depends exactly where it sits and how concave you are in that place. But then it's got just really nice classic armholes. And then the whole dress, you can sort of see it's fitted, but it's not skin tight. It's sort of skimming, and it's like a needle, I think just below the knee. And it has pockets, and can you see the pockets aren't at the side seam? So I'm going to zoom in a little bit for a second to show you. You can see the pockets are set slightly forward. And this is even when we can't, this black, as I said, black pattern cutters, or like when you look at fashion, it's like always I think, oh, I can't see anything. But because the pockets are here, so they're not in the side seam, that sort of shows me that there is some sort of, not a princess line, but the side seam basically has been moved forward. So it might be something like this, or it might be where it's actually coming a little bit higher, like that. And you could choose it, but that's a really nice way. So this is it's sort of a princess line hybrid, because in a princess line, of course, all the seams replace all your fitting. I think with this style, they will have probably what we call a Dior dart, but here it's used on Chanel. But it's where you have a little dart which basically goes into the seam, so it becomes really unobtrusive. So you don't have your seams going through the bust point, because normally, of course, with a seam dress, the bust goes something like that with princess line, and this little sort of dart here enables you to basically move the seam away. So it's a really nice way of choosing where to put your seam. And I've actually got a tutorial for that on my pattern cutting school on a jacket, but the same principle, which works beautifully in jackets as well. And as always, you can join my pattern cutting school. I'd love you, of course, to be on there. And it's just a really nice community. Really learn how to design and draft, and how to put your clothes together, and exactly the clothes for you. So the fit for you, the style for you. And there are, I think there's now nearly 500 lessons. So I really take you through the whole process. And there's a link in the description as usual. But what's really clever is, because we got the seams here, you can still put some of the waist fitting in as well, because what we could do quite often with the Dior dart, it's used with a more boxy block. However, because we've got the seam there, so you can probably put some of your waist shaping. I know the waist shaping is normally here, but you can sort of shift some of the waist shaping. You probably reduce it, don't make it as fitted, but you sort of shift it slightly to the side, so you still have the skimming lines, but it isn't fully fitted. So it's like a perfect black dress, because I think a perfect black dress is something you just put on. It follows the contours of your body, but it isn't uncomfortable. It's a shift dress, you could even say. So this is sort of a shift dress, but it does follow your body. So it's not a straight dress, or like the Mondrian dress and A-line, a sort of completely blocky dress. It still works with your body. And then, of course, what they've done is, if you have some very fancy jewellery, they've basically just done a slit here, exactly where the jewellery sits, I think. And then the jewellery sort of goes through here and then out here. And I think that's quite a 1920s thing, but they did it with scarves. So quite often in the 1920s shift dresses, you have like some sort of slits there, and then the scarf goes in and out. I think so anyway. So I thought that was beautiful in its simplicity. I really liked these see-through styles. So what's really interesting when you look at see-through styles like that, we got this one, and we also got, let me move it, we've also got this one, is how all the volume becomes part of it. So if you zoom into here, can you see how each of the lines you see on it? So if I'm going to move it to it and just draw it out for a second. So what you have on here, I'm going to draw it in shades of red and pink. You have a dress underneath. You can't really see how it looks like, but we've got it looks like it's maybe a similar neckline even to our dress just now, but less, actually could be similarly fitted as well. But again, we've got a dress like that. I'm gonna move it for a second because I can't remember what the skirt looked like. Yes, it's got center front opening. So you've got a dress like this underneath, and it's got center front seam, which then is opened up, which allows you to walk in it. And it's just got a really nice print on it. And what is quite nice, if you have a center front seam with a print like that, it basically breaks it, which otherwise you can look a little bit too flat. So by having a seam, actually, it might be done on purpose. So it's sort of, the print goes like this. So it basically cuts it and it breaks up, whereas otherwise a very flat surface. So that works really well. So rather than the print is going across like that, it's basically shifted across purposely. I think they actually have sort of pattern matched it, but you can see a little bit of a shift in it, which I quite like. So sometimes you want to pattern match, sometimes you don't. Then what we have on top of it is a really beautiful, really simple dress. Again, using our Dior dart, interestingly, which I probably should call something else, as this is Chanel. But again, we have the same as on here. We have a seam there, and then we've got a little dart. And because it's done in a see-through fabric, you can sort of, the whole dart, how it's finished, is visible. So normally we just leave our dart like that. What they've probably done is they trimmed the dart off. So it creates a sort of line rather than a triangle. I think that's what it looks like. And then again, what they've actually done is they've done a, if I highlight a bit, so you really see all the seams. So we see that seam again, that would be a French seam, I think. And then what they've done is sort of little tucks, again, very 1920s. If you look at sort of classic illustrations of skirts and blouses, they always have sort of little, what you call sort of handwork, hand stitching details. But again, they sort of break it up really nicely. And again, the skirt, probably, and the hem and the armhole facings, they probably have rolled or little pin hem seams. So again, they create like a more opaque edge, so it works really well. And then what of course is beautiful, what it has is a scarf neckline. So what it basically is a rectangle stitched to your front here and probably bagged out, so it's double, and then it becomes a scarf at the back. And I didn't actually manage to catch the back of this, but being quite often it is sort of then contrasted with a different neckline at the back, which is really beautiful. I wanted to finish off looking at the nice bottom volume, as I called it, because I thought they worked really well. Actually, if we zoom into this one for a second, and sort of quite unusual, that's what I quite like about, we've sort of been seeing really oversized stuff all the time, sort of 80s oversized big shoulders, and some of it wasn't here, and the sort of oversized jackets and stuff. But here it was sort of, it had the 1920 silhouette where it was less boxy, but more sort of slightly more relaxed maybe. So I thought that worked really well. So what's really interesting about this one is, again, the volume isn't too big. I'm going to move my computer out of the way so you can have a bit more light. Sorry, I just realized it's looking a bit dark, but hopefully still able to see. Again, playing with jewelry, which I really liked. And not too many handbags. I always think, oh, that's you trying to break commercially even. And of course, I'm not sure that's still true. But Chanel used to be, I think, the only couture line, which is of course under Karl Lagerfeld, the only couture collection which was actually commercially viable. And this is, of course, was the first collection by a new creative director. So that was really nice to see, because it doesn't look like Karl Lagerfeld. I really liked that it is a different kind of Chanel. Like, I actually preferred his use of colors a lot. This is again where I would like to see a real close-up, and they might be coming out still. But what it actually looks like is like it's sort of cut. So it really looks like a gill, and then it has basically several layers. And what is quite interesting, I can't quite see because it has these lines going there, which again break it up a little bit. It is quite, actually I've drawn it a little bit too fitted, because it is sort of a bit fitted, but then quite A-line. I think that's also because there might be several layers underneath. And I would imagine it also has a bust stud there. So what might be happening is that you actually have the sort of the lining fabric, which is just the top half of the garment. And of course you have to find a way of invisibly adding all these different layers. So I wonder whether they're sort of stitched in bit by bit to the lining. That's how what you normally do. And then the top layer is a little bit looser, and that enables it to just look like it's growing out of nowhere. And as I would imagine, all the layers underneath, they're stitched in bit by bit. So we're not all stitched to the line here on the lining. They're sort of then stitched an inch below, and so on. So it might be the same height. So all the panels underneath might be this shape. So it might be either the frill might be created, so woven to look like that, or it might actually be hand worked. Can't quite tell, because it looks like it grows out of the bodice, in which case it would be hand worked. But they might be all the same height, and then they just add it in bit by bit. So it's a really nice way. And if you wanted to make, you know, again, all these see-through fabrics which are coming on, you could just make a simple top, for example, out of chiffon. And then even if you had like if it was a print or something, and you could again layer it up a little bit, and you could have out of chiffon or see-through fabric, you could have several layers where it's sort of coming through. And of course you could also get the effect by getting trims or something, but that'd be a really nice way, or even sort of a scalloped edge or stuff. You can have fun with that, and of course using the fit you want, whether this is quite an unusual fit, I thought. And I think these are not your full shaping. Again, I think it's just part of your shaping. So it's either there's two options: either that it has a bust start and then it has a bit of extra shaping here, or this is actually a bust start. So I might have drawn it wrong, and the top might have actually had the bust start pivoted into the waist, which is quite unusual. But what that means is that your actual pattern piece looks something like this. And I wonder whether it's something like that, because if you pivot your bust start into the waist, it becomes really big, because there's a long distance between your bust point and your waist. I wonder whether I've done it on purpose to do with the construction. But also, again, it breaks it up. So you could think again with a top, you could actually, rather than having the darts like that, you could again do the sort of lines or something, and it breaks up the top and creates an extra line of interest in the fabric. So these were my picks from the Haute Couture Chanel collection. I thought they're all sort of things where you can use the bits you like and add them. A lot of the couture techniques, couture collection nowadays, are very much about the amazing embroidery, the beads and stuff. But I always think underlaying that is just because they have such a big tradition that maybe ready to wear is always trying to completely do these things differently. Couture, the techniques behind it are the sort of classic techniques. So you can just look at them and pick out the things you like. And here there's lots of interesting sort of fitting where you go slightly away from the fully fitted. Some of them are the fully 1920s line. There's just straight dresses, which again, maybe slightly more tricky to wear if you're fully busted, because they really rely on it being very straight. But this is where the sort of the order comes in, and for example, it's a black dress, how I still kept some of the fitting in the off princess lines. So it's sort of trying to find the fit for yourself, looking at what's happening. So the see-through stuff seems to be still everywhere. I prefer with underwear, like it was at Chanel, but playing with these layers, and you can make it very day wear or very special. And then it is just the finishing techniques which make all the difference. So I hope you enjoyed this analysis of the Chanel Couture. Do let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.